Cool.
Put
Thanks.
the bottom of the slide up there, actually.
Oh yeah. There you go. Perfect. Thanks.
So, sounds like we have a lot of experience, different ranges of accessibility knowledge. I'm glad everyone's come to the session. I guess maybe we should start before we dive into some specifics about what your challenges are, and get an idea, at least from some people, what accessibility means to you and what that means to the end user.
Well, I can start because I already gave my challenge, which is also what I've written on my sheet, is just getting client buy-in for fully accessible sites. We do what we can without being given, extra budget for make this accessible. And accessibility to me means like literally every person can use this website no matter what, ability level or, what they might be dealing with. And this is something that's actually, I've gotten more passionate about this recently. Like I have severe chronic migraines, and I have actually found out that leaves some sites inaccessible to me, like things that are too bright or have flashing or parallax sites are the absolute death of me. I will actually vomit. Sometimes scrolling through them, like unexpectedly, I will just like within seconds, I will go from like I'm scrolling through a site and I'm barfing.
Great argument to get rid of parallax.
Yes. Like to the point where like if a client wants one, I cannot work on that site. Like, not that we want to do them, but you can only fight so hard. We have to pay the bills, which everybody knows. But like, accessibility spans so many things. Like, and that has opened up like this huge world to me where like I've never, obviously we think of people who are blind and people who are deaf and things like that and colorblind, but like you wouldn't think of like, oh, people who have migraines, like that's a different thing that we have to think about, and there's all this different levels of accessibility. So I just want to make sure that like we think of all of these things and that we approach all of these things as we make websites, because everybody should be able to use every website. We think of little things like increasing text so grandma can read it, but there's so much more to it than that, and making clients think about that and understand like why that's so important.
Great. Anybody else have other thoughts?
I mean, a lot of it's removing barriers, right? And there's the standards and internationally it's WCAG 2.1 or 2.0 or 2.1 AA is the standards that people aim for, but also there's standards like ATAG, which is the Authoring Tool Accessibility Guideline, which is all about how to make not just the front-facing stuff accessible, but the back end, so that you can really provide for you can eliminate barriers throughout your entire process of information management. That's something that I'm excited in the possibility of getting more people involved in looking at those bigger challenges of making these systems help us make better, more accessible content.
This is a great opportunity for me to just listen, because I love to
So
hear
you
what
mentioned trouble getting
people's
client buy-in
desires,
because of
stories.
extra budget. How, and I'm curious because this has always been a question that comes up, is as an agency, how much extra budget do you think that it takes to make?
I'm not involved in that process, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure like what the money issue is or how much it would cost, but I just know that it would be, obviously it's going to be extra work for us, and it just seems like clients, unless they're required to, are just not understanding why. And maybe that's something that I think we need to be like as an agency like more educated on, like how we like inform clients of like this isn't a nice to have, I think this is sort of maybe like where responsive design was a few years ago. Like this, this isn't just some nice to have, like, there aren't any clients now who were like, well, we don't need a responsive site. Like, I think we need to get to that point with accessibility where it's like, yeah, of course it's going to be accessible. Like, that's just part of the package deal. And I think we just need to get our knowledge to the point where like that's part of the package that we're selling, and it's not negotiable. It's of course we're selling you an accessible site. Like, we're selling you a responsive site, we're selling you an accessible site, and like what that means to us as an agency, what that means to you as a client. So, I think that means education on our side as developers, as well as educating our clients.
That's the baseline we always try to convince people to go with.
Part of-
Anybody else? Oh, sorry.
Part of the challenge is that there's like what level of accessibility you're trying to get to, and like I've heard levels of like 5% being a reasonable budgetary assumption to assume for dealing with accessibility, especially if you're looking at it through the whole process, so that if you leave it to the very end, it's going to be more expensive. But if you build it through the whole process and involve as much design thinking in your process, it'll be better. But it's also like security, that you're never going to be 100% accessible, you're never going to be 100% secure, and you can spend as much money as you want to go off and make your site accessible. And if you've got the cash to do that, then great. I mean, try and aim for AAA, because it's a wonderful standard to try and get to, but it's expensive, very, very expensive to do that. Yeah.
Anybody else successfully tackled the challenge of convincing stakeholders or senior management that accessibility is worth it?
I've done it in a few different contexts. Sometimes it's a little bit easier if there are legislative sticks to sort of prod people along.
Yeah.
I worked in higher education for a while. There's lots of applications there. I think Mike, you've probably done a lot of stuff with government where it's very similar. But I think of a lot of it as just building into the budget up front, and if people start questioning it, then you start sort of providing answers and backing it up with strong facts.
Yeah, I've noticed it's much easier to convince government clients because there's usually some sort of requirement, and it's usually not well defined, but just the fact that it's in there makes them concerned about it. Government clients are really concerned about compliance.
It is thankfully better defined now than it was. Now that Section 508 is harmonized with WCAG 2.0, it's at least a stronger standard to meet than it used to be.
I think another issue is that there are all these different definitions of accessibility and all these different levels and all this alphabet soup, and it's hard to find it is hard to just define accessibility and to define it for yourself as a developer, to define it for a client, to find, just go, it's not something that you can just go online and find one definition of this is accessibility, and I think that makes it hard too.
When the World Wide Web Consortium developed the version 2 of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, they sort of tried to boil it down into 4 principles that help explain the tenets of accessibility. So they tried to make all of the different checkpoints fit into the categories of perceivability, operability, understandability, and robustness. It's always the